There's a rumor circulating right now that Marvel is planning to drop its biggest announcement of the year at San Diego Comic-Con this July. And that announcement is the official cast of the MCU's X-Men reboot. If that lands, it would be the most significant moment in a superhero panel since the original Avengers lineup was announced back in 2010. And honestly, the timing makes complete sense. The script is being rewritten as we speak, casting has reportedly been in motion since early this year, and everything about the project's trajectory suggests Marvel is ready to go public. So let's actually dig into what's happening here, because the story of how this movie is being built is just as interesting as what it might end up being. Start with what makes the X-Men different from every other team Marvel has brought into the MCU. The Avengers were always about power. Who has it, who's misusing it, and whether the right people can stop the wrong ones. The Fantastic Four are about family and discovery, about curiosity as a superpower. The X-Men are about something darker and more uncomfortable. They're about what a society does to people it considers dangerous or deviant simply for existing. That's a civil rights allegory wrapped in action stories, and it's been landing since Stan Lee and Jack Kirby first put it on the page in 1963. The Fox movies understood this to varying degrees. The first two Bryan Singer films captured it genuinely well. After that, it got messy, but the core material is so rich that even a half-baked adaptation can still hit because the bones are that strong. What Schreier and his team are building needs to get those bones exactly right, and from everything that's come out about this project, they know it. Jake Schreier was formally confirmed as director in July of last year. He came off Thunderbolts having earned exactly the kind of critical reputation that gets you handed a franchise-defining assignment. That film underperformed commercially, around $380 million against a $180 million budget, but Marvel rewarded him anyway, specifically because of the character work. That tells you something important about how Marvel is treating this project. They're not handing the X-Men to someone guaranteed to make a safe blockbuster. They're handing it to someone they believe can make it feel true to what the comics actually are. What Schreier has said publicly about his approach is worth paying attention to. He described spending the past year doing a deep dive into the comics, the entire Chris Claremont run, Grant Morrison's new X-Men, going through corners of the mythology that haven't been touched by any of the Fox films. He's specifically been looking for the angles that feel unexplored. And before you assume that's just standard director doing homework talk, consider who he brought in to write. Lee Sung-jin, the creator of Beef on Netflix, and Joanna Kalo, co-showrunner of The Bear and a key creative voice on Thunderbolts, are now working on the script together. Schreier talked about what draws him to Lee specifically, the ability to take interpersonal wounds, small private grievances, and expand them until they become something almost mythological. That's precisely the register great X-Men stories operate in. Xavier and Magneto aren't just two powerful men disagreeing about strategy. They're two people who survived the same historical horror and arrived at completely opposite conclusions about what humanity deserves. That's a soap opera running on philosophical fuel, and it's exactly what Lee knows how to write. Lee himself told Variety the offer to join this project was an immediate yes, regardless of how packed his schedule was. And he mentioned something interesting. His favorite X-Man growing up wasn't Cyclops or Wolverine. It was Gambit. He was always drawn to the supporting characters, the ones with a specific kind of cool that was hard to articulate. That detail matters. It signals this isn't a movie that's going to coast on the 5 most famous faces and call it a day. The script they're working from now is the latest in a long development chain. The earliest drafts came from Aaron Rabin and Zach Dean. Then Michael Leslie, who wrote the screenplay for the Hunger Games prequel, took a pass. Then Schreier got the job and the whole thing is being rebuilt. Some people saw that as a red flag. Multiple drafts, no cast announcement, no release date locked. But this is exactly what happened on Thunderbolts. Eric Pearson wrote the original script. Then Lee and Kalo came in to rewrite it, and the film turned out to be one of the best reviewed entries in the MCU in years. A new director coming in and reshaping the material to fit his vision isn't chaos. It's just how development works when you're actually trying to make something good. Schreier went on record saying the team is aiming to do something that feels genuinely new, that Kevin Feige has been pushing for them to identify corners of the X-Men world that haven't been done brilliantly yet by the Fox films, so they can go somewhere that isn't just a retread. Now let's get to the part everyone actually wants to know about, the casting. Nothing is officially confirmed yet, but the rumor landscape is unusually dense right now, which usually means something is close to going public. Sadie Sink has been linked to Jean Grey for a while now, and scooper Jeff Snyder has gone on record saying he hears that is, in fact, the role she's playing. The current theory is that she debuts as the character in Spider-Man Brand New Day this July, which would be a deliberate callback to how Marvel seeded Phase 1, where Nick Fury showed up in a post-credits scene, Black Widow got introduced before her solo film, and nobody arrived fully formed. For Cyclops, both Harris Dickinson and Jack Champion have been floated, and Jacob Elordi is reportedly very high on Marvel's shortlist. Peter Claffey, currently in Game of Thrones spin-off territory on HBO, is reportedly being looked at for Beast. Hunter Schafer has come up in connection with Mystique, and in what would be a genuinely fascinating piece of casting, Sydney Sweeney is reportedly being considered for Emma Frost, which makes a kind of perfect sense if you think about it. Frost is glacially composed, manipulative, and consistently underestimated, and Sweeney has spent the last few years proving she can do a lot more than people initially assumed. Beyond all of that, Emma Mackey and Millie Bobby Brown have also been mentioned in connection with various unspecified roles. One of the most important structural pieces of reporting right now comes from the Cosmic Circus, which says the plan is to anchor the film around the original 5 X-Men from the early comics: Cyclops, Angel, Beast, and Iceman, with roughly 3 additional mutants rounding out the lineup. Crucially, Wolverine is not expected to be in that initial group. That's a bold call, but it's the right one. Logan is so dominant a presence in the Fox films that building the new version around him would almost guarantee constant comparison. Starting without him lets the new cast establish themselves before he eventually arrives, and it keeps Hugh Jackman's future in the franchise, which is apparently still undecided, as something genuinely dramatic rather than predetermined. Here's where I want to share my own read on how this all fits together structurally, because I think the Fantastic Four First Steps comparison is the key to understanding what Marvel is actually building. That film was set in its own distinct alternate Earth with its own visual language and its own sense of timeline. It didn't drop the Four directly into the main MCU continuity from frame 1. It let the film breathe as a self-contained thing while still being part of the larger multiverse architecture. The X-Men reboot could follow that exact playbook, place it in a distinct Earth, give Schreier room to build a world without having to reconcile 33 films of existing continuity, and then pull those threads into the main timeline at the right moment, likely through a crossover event several phases in. This would also solve the single most annoying problem the MCU has had with mutants since acquiring them. Why didn't any of these people show up during the Infinity War? If the X-Men exist on a distinct Earth that gets folded into the new unified reality after Secret Wars, you never have to answer that question. The universe changed. They were always there. The answer is structural rather than explanatory. And this is where Secret Wars becomes the most important film Marvel has ever made, beyond any individual story it tells. The Jonathan Hickman comics it's adapting end with Reed Richards not simply restoring what was lost after Doom's Battleworld collapses. He creates something new. A singular reality assembled from fragments of multiple destroyed universes where different timelines coexist as if they always belong together. If the MCU adapts that ending the way I think they will, then Secret Wars isn't a conclusion. It's a reset switch that gives Marvel permission to establish a new baseline universe where mutants have always existed, where Xavier's school has been running for decades, where the Sentinel program has a history, where Magneto's past is baked into the DNA of the world. Nobody has to explain anything, it's just the new reality. The groundwork for this has been getting quietly laid for years, Kamala Khan being revealed as a mutant in her series rather than an Inhuman the way she is in the comics was not a throwaway change. That was Marvel putting the word mutant into the MCU vocabulary years before it becomes the central theme of an entire saga. Namor being framed as a mutant in Wakanda Forever serves the same purpose. These aren't cosmetic alterations, they're load-bearing, and the Fox-era actors reportedly showing up in Avengers Doomsday this December. Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Kelsey Grammer, James Marsden, that's the farewell ceremony. That's Marvel giving the version of X-Men that raised an entire generation of superhero fans a proper, dignified send-off inside the biggest crossover ever assembled, so that when the new cast eventually appears, there's no ambiguity. The torch has been passed on screen. You felt it happen. Kevin Feige has reportedly mapped out a 10-year arc for mutant characters. The working assumption among people who follow this closely is that the post-Secret Wars MCU will be branded as the Mutant Saga. The same structural ambition that made phases 1 through 3 feel like a single cohesive narrative. The Avengers assembled, the multiverse shattered everything, and now the mutants, people who've always been feared for simply existing, get to inherit the world. That's not just a franchise plan. As a thematic arc for a decade of blockbuster cinema, it's genuinely compelling in a way the MCU hasn't been since Endgame. The last thing I'll say is this: if the Comic-Con announcement rumor is accurate, we're about 3 months away from the most talked about casting reveal in years. And when that lineup drops, the conversation is going to shift shift completely. Right now, we're debating whether Marvel can get this right. After that reveal, we'll be debating whether they actually did.